Hi, my name is Greg. I'm an atheist. I post as GKLR on YouTube, and I'd like to reply to Greg Solomon's video titled My Reply to the Atheist video clip, in which he's replying to a video clip which I had not seen before. And I thought he did a fairly good job in refuting it, provided you accept his understanding of Hebrew. And I have no comprehension of Hebrew, so I'm not going to oppose what he had to say on that. I'll take it on faith. What Greg said about Hebrew is in fact the case. And I'd also argue that it does nothing to oppose atheism, even if true, because I've never heard of an atheist that bases their atheism on that video or the argument presented in that video. But it was a good job. The problem that I had with Mr. Solomon's claims were his clear contradiction, how he contradicted himself, and with respect to what an atheist is. He has it right at first. At about 12 minutes into his video, he says that atheism, and it's between the 12 and 13 minute point of his video that I refer to, that atheism is a belief at first. He says that, you have to have belief. He even goes as far as to say it takes just as much faith to be an atheist as it is to be a theist. And obviously he's not heard of Occam's razor, which declares that if we can explain the universe and we have two different systems and one takes less leaps of faith, then we would take that option. And this is fundamental to most atheists that I know of that are educated on the topic, at least. So there it is that it's quite obvious that we take less leaps of faith in order to reach the conclusions we do. And so that would, I think, clearly counter what say that it takes equal amounts of faith. Well, it's just not the case. There's certainly no rationality at all in believing that men walk on water or rise from the dead. So again, we want to look at what's rational. I believe a large part of his problem was this misunderstanding of atheism. At first, at the 12-minute point, he indicates that atheism is a belief, that it needs to be a belief. And then he talks about Isaac Asimov in respect to that he claimed that he couldn't prove that there's no God. He just suspects that there's no God, and this would indicate a belief. And and then he's claiming that he's not an atheist, he's an agnostic. Well, no. Believing that there is no God is what an atheist is. So when he claims that he can't prove it, that's an admission that it's in a belief. In other words, it could be false. There's a possibility that it's false. An honest atheist, one with honesty and integrity, will say that they believe that there's no God, but that they can't prove that all possible gods don't exist. God may very well have been born 5 seconds ago on Venus, and since it takes data longer than 5 seconds to travel from Venus, I couldn't possibly know if God was or not born on Venus 5 seconds ago. So I believe that there was no God born on Venus 5 seconds ago without the proof that that's true, because I have no reason to believe that it is true. Likewise, I believe there's no flying spaghetti monster, and I can't prove that there's no flying spaghetti monster. So I'm not. Why should I be worried about it? And all of the other mythical creatures that exist in this context, likewise, couldn't be proven to not exist. Now, what can be proven to not exist? And I think that this is more important than understanding or making accusations and inflammatory comments like, that leave atheism undefinable in Greg Solomon's video. I mean, first it's a belief, and then even if you believe it, you're not an atheist, you're an agnostic. And I'll get to agnosticism in a second. But first I'd like to talk about how you prove that something doesn't exist and what is impossible. The only impossibilities, there is no other impossibilities other than P and not P at the same time, P being proposition. So if I say God exists and God doesn't exist at the same time, that God is impossible. That God is proven to not exist. It's logically impossible. There's no logical alternatives to the either or. It's not a false dichotomy. It is called a logical contradiction. P and not P at the same time. And at the same time is key, because of course the red ball can be on the table and then the red ball can not be on the table, but not at the same time. So this is a key issue to what a contradiction is. The only thing that cannot exist and be impossible is that which is shown as P and not P. at the same time. Now, this does apply to some gods and some described gods, the descriptions to God, which is another issue I want to take up with Mr. Solomon, is that there's no evidence for God or against God. Well, there's mountains of evidence for either side. It's what we accept as proof that I think is what you mean to say, is that we can't conclusively prove it one way or the other. And I believe that this is an assumption that everybody has going into a real serious investigation of such a question. We don't think that we're going to concretely prove whether or not there's a God, except the theist who claims that he knows there's a God. And there's the difference, is that the intellectual integrity shown by an atheist who claims they believe in a God and allows for the possibility that there is a God, he said, I believe there's no God. I don't have concrete absolute proof that there's no God. I believe it. And it's an admission that I don't have proof. If a theist could get that far and show that kind of intellectual integrity, it would sure make the world a nicer place, because they could say, you know, I believe in a God, but I don't know that there's a God. I just hope that there is. And this is a far cry from what you'll hear from most theists who will tell you they know that there is a God. Next we get into agnosticism a little bit. In agnosticism, you describe an agnostic in the first time correctly, in the sense that an agnostic pursues the question of what man can know. Not is there a God or not, that's theism or atheism. Agnosticism asks, can man know that there's a God? Independent of whether or not you believe there's a God, can we know there's a God? So in other words, as an atheist, I believe there's no God. As an agnostic, I believe that man can't prove that there's no God. So the beliefs are not incompatible, such as, even if you're a theist and you said that you believe there's a God, but you don't believe that man can prove it or not, then you're an agnostic. And so you can be a theist and an agnostic without any conflict, and you can be an atheist and an agnostic without any conflict. So I believe that this misunderstanding is something that's rampant. It's a common one, and it's something that I think needs addressing as well. And it's I want to thank Mr. Solomon for making a video on atheism and bringing it to light. I think that it was a enlightening video to see different people's perspective as to these issues. The only other point that I really had to raise about the video that Mr. Solomon made was in respect to his understanding of what a Christian is. And again, this would be a contentious issue. A Christian is anybody who declares himself a Christian. I mean, if you believe in the divinity of Christ, you're a Christian. Independent of if that's a black Christian, you're a Rastafarian, and you believe that Christ was black and came in the 1930s. Haile Selassie, they believe that he was Jesus and the second coming of Jesus. It doesn't matter that it isn't uniform to somebody else's church, provided that you believe that Jesus is the Son of God. This is what makes you a Christian. You believe in the divinity of Jesus. To say that all of a sudden, therefore, because you're a Christian, that you would never sin, I don't believe is coherent with Christianity. And so I would reject Mr. Solomon's contention that, you know, Christians couldn't be found in jail. You know, they could never do no wrong and be a true Christian, which again, this is something that's refuted regularly by the atheists out here, that Christianity is a belief, and to call someone a true Christian is a complete misunderstanding, that there is no such thing as a true Christian. Otherwise, Christianity is not a belief, and it is. So the biggest problem that the religious have is they can't distinguish between beliefs and truths, and I would hope that somebody who appeals to logic, like Mr. Solomon tends to, is that they would at least get it right.